My sister handed me a bowl of soup that could have killed me, and she smiled while doing it. I'm Bianca Robert, 28 years old, and I've spent the last 6 years carrying 2 EpiPens everywhere I go. Most people think that's the hardest part of living with a severe shellfish allergy. The constant vigilance, the label reading, the anxiety every time someone offers you food. But they're wrong. The hardest part is watching someone you love weaponize your vulnerability in front of a room full of strangers. Victoria didn't slip shrimp stock into my soup by accident. She didn't forget about my allergy in the chaos of hosting. She looked me in the eye, called me dramatic, told 15 of her most important business contacts that I was just seeking attention, and then served me something that sent me into anaphylactic shock within 3 minutes. What she didn't see, what she was too busy performing for her audience to notice, was Michael Reeves, CEO of Apex Pharmaceuticals, already moving toward me with his phone to his ear. What she didn't hear was him calmly giving my address to 911 while another guest retrieved my EpiPen from my purse. And what she definitely didn't consider was that every single second of her calculated cruelty was being recorded by the very security cameras she'd installed to show off her picture-perfect home. This isn't a story about an allergy. It's about the moment I learned that the person who taught me to tie my shoes could look at me choking and feel nothing but annoyance that I was ruining her party. Before we dive into how I set myself free, please take a moment to like and subscribe, but only if you truly enjoy this story. Where are you watching from? Drop your city below in the comments. Now let me take you back to where it all began. Victoria was 6 years older than me, which meant she was basically a god when we were kids. I was the surprise baby, the one mom and dad hadn't planned for, and Victoria took that role seriously. She taught me to read before kindergarten. She braided my hair every morning before school, even though it made her late. When I was 7 and came home crying because kids made fun of my glasses, she spent an entire weekend making me feel like the coolest person alive. I remember one specific afternoon when I was 11. We were at our grandmother's house for Thanksgiving, and I just discovered I couldn't eat the crab dip everyone loved. My throat felt tight, my lips were tingling, and I was too scared to tell anyone because I didn't want to ruin the holiday. Victoria noticed. She always noticed. She took me into the bathroom, made me drink water, and stayed with me until my breathing normalized. Then she went downstairs and told Mom we needed to leave immediately for a girl emergency. She didn't embarrass me. She didn't make it about her. She just protected me, the way she always had. That was the day we ended up in the emergency room and learned I had a severe shellfish allergy. Victoria held my hand through every test. She made jokes with the nurses. She looked at me with such fierce certainty and said, "We'll figure this out together, Bee. I've got you." For years after that, she was my translator in restaurants. She'd scan menus, ask detailed questions about ingredients, create safe zones wherever we went. She bought me my first medical alert bracelet and made it feel like a piece of jewelry instead of a warning label. When I went to college, she sent me care packages full of safe snacks and a laminated card with instructions for using an EpiPen. She was my person, the one I called when I got my first freelance design contract, the one who talked me through my worst breakup, the one who knew exactly how I took my coffee and could read my mood from a single text message. I believed in Victoria the way you believe in gravity, completely, without question, as a fundamental law of my universe. The changes started about 2 years ago, right after Victoria launched her startup. She'd always been ambitious, but this was different. She'd secured seed funding for a tech platform that connected sustainable brands with conscious consumers. And suddenly, every conversation became about networking, optics, investor relations. At first, I thought I was being supportive. She'd call me less often, cancel our weekly dinners, respond to my texts hours later with brief, distracted messages. That's what starting a company looks like, I told myself. She's building something important. But there were moments that felt off, like puzzle pieces that didn't quite fit. Like the time she asked me to redesign her company logo and then used it without crediting me on the website. When I brought it up gently, she laughed. "Oh, Bea, it's just family. You know I appreciate you." But she never added my name to the site. Or the dinner party 6 months before the incident, when she introduced me to a potential investor as my little sister who does graphics. Not my sister, who's a talented freelance designer, just does graphics, like it was a hobby I'd outgrow. I started noticing how she'd change the subject whenever I mentioned my work, how she'd glance at her phone when I was talking, how she'd make small comments about my lifestyle. "Must be nice to work from home in your pajamas," or "I wish I had time to binge watch shows like you do." Each one was tiny, negligible, the kind of thing you could explain away with stress or distraction. But they accumulated. The worst was about 3 months before everything fell apart. I'd mentioned my allergy at a casual brunch with some of her new friends, just a normal part of ordering food. After they left, Victoria turned to me with this tight smile and said, "You know, Bea, you don't always have to make everything about your dietary restrictions. It's kind of exhausting for other people." I felt like she'd slapped me. "I was just ordering food," I said quietly. I know. I'm just saying maybe be more low-key about it. You don't want people to think you're high maintenance." High maintenance? For having a medical condition that could kill me? I drove home that day with my hands shaking on the wheel, trying to convince myself she hadn't meant it the way it sounded. Victoria knew what this allergy meant. She'd been there from the beginning. She understood. Except somewhere along the way, my sister had started seeing my survival needs as social inconveniences. And I'd been too loyal, too hopeful, too desperate to preserve our bond to see what was happening. She wasn't protecting me anymore. She was managing me, minimizing me, preparing me to be smaller so she could be bigger. The dinner party invitation came 3 weeks before the event. Victoria had finally secured a meeting with a venture capital firm that could provide her Series A funding, and she was hosting a casual dinner at her Bay Area home to showcase her network and vision. She wanted me there. "I need family there, Bea," she said on the phone. "You ground me. Plus, it'll be good for you to meet these people. Who knows, maybe you'll make some connections too." I wanted to believe her. God, I wanted to believe her. I texted her my dietary restrictions 3 separate times. The first was 2 weeks before. "Hey, just confirming, no shellfish obviously, and please make sure nothing is cooked in the same oil or with cross-contamination. Love you." The second was 1 week out. "V, I'm so excited for your party. Quick reminder about the shellfish thing. Just want to make sure whoever's catering knows it's serious." The third was the day before. "See you tomorrow. Don't forget, shellfish allergy. I'll bring my EpiPens just in case, but I know you've got this." She responded to each one with variations of "got it" and "don't worry." I arrived at 7 p.m. on a cool October evening. Victoria's house looked like something from Architectural Digest. Floor-to-ceiling windows, minimalist furniture, fresh flowers everywhere. She'd hired a private chef and a server. There were about 15 people there, all dressed in expensive casual wear, talking about market disruption and sustainability metrics. Victoria greeted me with a quick hug that felt more like a photo op. "Bea, you made it. Come meet everyone." For the first hour, everything seemed fine. I made small talk with a woman who ran a green beauty brand. I listened to a venture capitalist explain blockchain. I felt awkward and underdressed in my department store dress, but I was there for Victoria. Then dinner was served. The server placed a bowl in front of me, a creamy soup garnished with herbs. It looked safe enough, but I've learned never to assume. "Excuse me," I said quietly to the server, "what's in this soup?" Before he could answer, Victoria's voice cut across the table, bright and sharp. "Oh my God, Bea, really? Right now?" 15 faces turned toward me. My face went hot. I just need to check. It's vegetable soup, Victoria said, smiling at her guests with this practiced expression of patient exasperation. Completely safe, I promise you, you're not going to die from eating dinner at my house. Someone laughed. Uncomfortable, polite. Victoria, I just want to make sure. Bianca, she set down her wine glass. I love you, but this is exactly what I was talking about. You make every meal into a production. These restrictions you have, I know they're real to you, but sometimes I think you use them to get attention. The room went silent. Real to me? I think you use them? Michael Reeves, who I'd later learn was sitting 3 seats to my right, set down his fork very carefully. It's just soup, Victoria continued, her voice dripping with a kindness that felt like poison. I made sure it was safe. Now please, let's just enjoy the evening without drama. She was good. She'd framed it perfectly. The concerned big sister managing her difficult younger sibling's anxiety. Several people were nodding sympathetically at her. I looked down at my bowl. Every instinct screamed at me not to eat it, but 15 pairs of eyes were on me, and Victoria had just called me dramatic, attention-seeking, paranoid in front of the people she most wanted to impress. If I pushed back, I'd confirm everything she'd said. If I left, I'd ruin her party. If I asked the chef directly, I'd humiliate her. So I did what she'd been training me to do for months. I made myself smaller. I picked up my spoon. You're right, I said quietly. I'm sorry. And I took a bite. The first thing I noticed was the taste, richer than vegetable broth should be, slightly sweet, familiar in a way that made my stomach drop. The second thing was the tingle in my lips. I set down the spoon. My throat felt tight. Victoria, I said, and my voice sounded strange. What's in this? She wasn't looking at me. She was laughing at something the investor to her left had said. Victoria? Louder now. My tongue felt thick. She glanced over, annoyed. What now? What's in the soup? My hands were shaking. I could feel my airways starting to close. I stood up, knocking my chair backward, reaching for my purse. The room tilted. Someone gasped. And then Michael Reeves was beside me, his phone already at his ear, his voice calm and clear. I need an ambulance at 2847 Oakmont Drive. Anaphylactic shock, female, late 20s, shellfish allergy. Someone else, a woman with silver hair, was digging through my purse, finding my EpiPen, reading the instructions aloud. The last thing I saw before my vision started to blur was Victoria's face. Not concerned, not sorry. Annoyed that I was making a scene. I'm going to stop here for a second. If this story is resonating with you at all, or if you've ever felt the pain of being misunderstood by the people who are supposed to love you most, please take a moment to like this video and subscribe. It really lets me know that sharing these hard stories is worth it. I woke up in the hospital 6 hours later with an IV in my arm and my mother sitting beside my bed, not Victoria. Mom. Thank God, Mom said when she saw my eyes open. You scared us to death. Us. As if Victoria had been scared. As if Victoria hadn't deliberately fed me something that could have killed me. Where is she? My voice came out hoarse, damaged. Mom looked away. She's at home. She's very upset, Bianca. She had no idea the soup would affect you like that. She feels terrible. The lie sat between us like a physical thing. She knew. Each word hurt. I texted her 3 times. She knew exactly what she was doing. Honey, she made a mistake. She was stressed about the party. She wasn't thinking. She told me I was being dramatic. She said my allergy was for attention. Then she fed me shrimp stock and told me to stop making a scene while I was dying. Mom's face did something complicated. I'd seen that expression my whole life, the one that meant she was choosing between her daughters and had already decided which one was worth less trouble. "I'm sure she didn't mean it that way," Mom said softly. "You know Victoria loves you. She's just under so much pressure with the company. Maybe you were being a little sensitive about the food thing." I pulled out my IV. "Bianca, what are you—" "I'm leaving." I swung my legs out of bed, ignoring the dizziness. "And I need you to decide right now, Mom. Do you believe me or do you believe her?" She couldn't meet my eyes. "I believe you both had a misunderstanding that got out of hand. These things happen in families. You'll work it out." That was her answer. I called an Uber from the hospital lobby and went home to my small apartment. For 3 days, I didn't answer anyone's calls. Victoria left me 7 voicemails, each one a masterclass in manipulation. The first: "B, oh my God, I'm so sorry. Please call me back. I need to know you're okay." The third: "Mom said you're being difficult about this. I get that you're upset, but you're really hurting me by shutting me out." The seventh: "Fine, if you want to throw away our entire relationship over an accident, that's your choice. But honestly, you're being incredibly selfish." I didn't know about the security footage yet. I didn't know that Michael Reeves had already called his company's legal team. I didn't know that the woman with silver hair who'd administered my EpiPen was a retired ER physician who'd documented everything she'd witnessed. All I knew was that my sister had tried to kill me, my mother had chosen her, and I was alone. I spent those 3 days in bed, oscillating between rage and grief so intense I thought I'd break apart. I'd lost my sister, but worse than that, I'd never really had her, not the way I thought I did. The person I'd believed in, trusted completely, built my entire childhood around, had been willing to risk my life to avoid social embarrassment. On the 4th day, my phone rang from an unknown number. I almost didn't answer. "Ms. Roberts, this is Jennifer Chen from Apex Pharmaceuticals. I'm calling on behalf of our CEO, Michael Reeves. He wanted to make sure you're okay, and he'd like to speak with you about what happened at the dinner party. Would you be willing to meet?" That's when everything changed. Michael Reeves met me at a quiet coffee shop 2 days later. He was in his mid-50s, with kind eyes and the calm demeanor of someone who'd seen enough of life to know what mattered. "I have a daughter with a peanut allergy," he said after we'd ordered. "She's 16. I've watched people dismiss it, minimize it, treat it like she's being difficult. So when I heard your sister say what she said, and then saw what she did," he shook his head, "I knew exactly what was happening." He slid a tablet across the table. "Victoria's security system automatically uploads footage to the cloud. What I'm about to show you was provided to me by the chef she hired, who was horrified by what happened and felt you had a right to see it." I watched the footage 3 times, every angle, every moment. There was Victoria in her kitchen before guests arrived, talking to the chef, his mouth forming the words "shellfish allergy," his concerned expression, her waving her hand dismissively. "Just use a little in the base, she's being dramatic, it's not actually that serious." There was the moment at the table when she called me attention-seeking, performing for her audience. There was her face when I started reacting, not panicked, but calculating, deciding in real time whether my medical emergency was worth disrupting her party. And there, clear as day, was Michael immediately taking action, while Victoria sat frozen, not with fear, but with annoyance. "I've already had my legal team review this. What your sister did wasn't just cruel. In California, knowingly exposing someone to a life-threatening allergen could be considered assault. At minimum, it's grounds for a civil suit." I couldn't stop crying. Not sad crying, the kind that comes when someone finally validates your reality after everyone else has told you you're overreacting. "Why are you helping me?" I asked. "Because I've spent 20 years building a pharmaceutical company based on the premise that people's medical needs matter, that their safety matters, that their lives matter more than someone else's social comfort." He met my eyes. "And because you deserve someone in your corner who believes you." He connected me with an attorney, a good one, the kind of lawyer who doesn't take cases unless they're certain they'll win. Within a week, we'd sent a cease and desist letter to Victoria, along with copies of the security footage and witness statements from 4 party guests, including Dr. Sarah Chen, the woman who'd saved my life with my EpiPen. Victoria's response came through her own lawyer, a claim that I was trying to extort her, that I'd always been jealous of her success, that I had a history of exaggerating my medical conditions for sympathy. That's when Michael made a phone call. See, Victoria's startup had been in final negotiations with a venture capital firm for Series A funding. The managing partner of that firm happened to be Michael's college roommate, and when Michael explained what had happened, showed him the footage, shared the documentation, the firm pulled out immediately. Not because Michael asked them to, because they did their own risk assessment and realized that anyone who would deliberately endanger a family member to avoid social inconvenience was not someone they could trust with fiduciary responsibility. Victoria's startup collapsed within 3 months. But here's what actually healed me. It wasn't the revenge. It wasn't watching her company fail or her social circle shrink as people learned what she'd done. It was therapy, real, intensive therapy with a trauma specialist who helped me understand that Victoria's betrayal wasn't about my worth. It was about her character, that I'd spent years making myself smaller, quieter, easier, trying to deserve the love she'd shown me as a child, never realizing she'd been slowly withdrawing that love as I became an adult who might compete for attention. It was building a life completely separate from her, taking on bigger freelance contracts, moving to a different city, creating friendships based on mutual respect rather than shared history. It was the moment, about 8 months after the incident, when I realized I'd gone an entire week without thinking about her. Not with anger, not with grief, just nothing. She'd become someone I used to know. Mom still calls sometimes, asking when I'll forgive Victoria, when we can move past this. I tell her the same thing every time. I've moved past it. I just moved past it without her in my life. The civil suit settled out of court. Victoria's insurance paid for my medical bills and then some. I donated half of the settlement to food allergy research and advocacy. The other half went towards starting my own design studio. I kept one thing from that night. A screenshot of the security footage, just the moment before I took that first bite of soup. I look at it sometimes, not to stay angry, but to remember what it looks like when someone asks you to make yourself smaller for their comfort, and to remind myself that I will never, ever do it again. My sister handed me a bowl of soup that could have killed me, and she smiled while doing it. But what she didn't give me, what she never could have given me, was the strength I found when I finally stopped waiting for her to be the person I needed and became that person for myself. I don't think about Victoria much anymore. Occasionally, I hear updates through mutual acquaintances. She moved to another state, started over, apparently tells people she has an estranged sister who couldn't handle her success. I used to care about what stories she told. Now I know that people who lived through someone's cruelty don't need to argue with their revised version of history. The truth lives in us. We carry it in our healed wounds and rebuilt lives. I still carry 2 EpiPens everywhere I go. I still read labels obsessively. I still feel a spike of anxiety when someone offers me food I didn't prepare. But now I also carry something else, the absolute certainty that my needs are not negotiable, that my safety is not up for debate, that anyone who asks me to minimize my survival to make them comfortable has already told me exactly who they are. I used to believe that family meant unconditional love. Now I know it's supposed to mean unconditional safety. And when those 2 things can't coexist, safety wins every time. And I want to hear from you. Have you ever been betrayed by someone who was supposed to protect you? How did you rebuild trust? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. Your story might be exactly what someone else needs to hear today. The best revenge isn't destruction. It's becoming so completely whole that their absence becomes irrelevant. I'm Bianca Robert, and I'm finally free. This was another story from Revenge Room, where we turn pain into purpose and betrayal into balance. Please don't forget to subscribe and join us for the next transformation.